Shahram Akbarzadeh is a professor of Middle Eastern politics at Deaking University, and he joins us from Melbourne in Australia. Welcome. What do you make of Pezeshkian's victory? What's the message from the Iranian public, do you think?
Well, thanks for having me. There are a number of messages here. One is that half the voters did not actually participate in the election, which is very significant for a presidential election. And given that the top leadership in Iran had insisted that everyone should vote and that every vote would be like a missile that Iran would shoot at its enemies. This was a big referendum for the legitimacy of the political system in Iran. So that's number one. Number two is that a lot of the people have boycotted the election, and those who did participate and had a choice were confronted with the choice of bad and worse, perhaps ineffective and worse. Jalili promised to simply continue Raisi's agenda, Raisi's policies, so business as usual, which would have been disastrous for Iran, and many voters did not want that because that meant continuation of sanctions, confrontation with the international community, and restrictor limitations on social freedoms, the dress code. Pezeshkian has promised change, has promised to bring about a level of rapprochement with the West. He's promised to free Iran from the chains of sanctions, provide some social freedoms, remove the morality police from the streets. So he has promised change. And when voters are confronted with that option, business as usual or some change, of course, they have gone for the promise of change. But there's a big but here. People in Iran are very conscious that Pezeshkian is not the ultimate decision maker, that everything has to go through the approval and consent of the supreme leader, who is the head of state. And without the head of state's approval, none of the policies for change will actually be implemented. So that's a major, major challenge that Pezeshkian is facing.
So given what you've said, Shahram, both about the promises that Pezeshkian is making, but also about the limitations to his power, how much of a difference do you think his election will be able to make in terms of Iran's outlook and its positioning in the world?
Well, Pezeshkian is quite conscious of his own red lines. There are some red lines that he is not going to cross. Iran is committed to its anti-American foreign policy. Iran is committed to its anti-Israel foreign policy. Iran is committed to promoting and supporting Hezbollah and Hamas and groups that come under the umbrella of axis of resistance. So these things will not change, and Pezeshkian cannot change them. But Pezeshkian can perhaps tone down the rhetoric. He can tone down the very aggressive and confrontational rhetoric that was coming out of the previous administration, Raisi's administration. So by toning down rhetoric, by avoiding confrontation, he can open up avenues and possibilities for dialogue, and possibly, depending on who's sitting in Washington, possibly a resumption of negotiations with the United States over its nuclear program and other important matters.
Okay, very interesting. Shahram Akbarzadeh, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.